this time of year, it's all about expectations and managing them. And it's true, of course, the awful weather that we had will hurt the economy, will add to prices and so inflation, and it'll also come at a cost to the budget. But it's not the only thing that's happening. A bunch of big things happening in the economy and the budget right now.
Chris, you've done a deep dive into the federal finances. Why don't you believe the Treasurer's projections for spending restraint are realistic?
Because we haven't had great spending restraint in Australia for a very long time. Certainly not in the last couple of years. In the last couple of years, the share of federal spending as a share of Australian national income risen from 24 point something to 27 point something in the coming year. That's a pretty sharp increase in the size of the National Social Compact. Some of it was the election promises from last time. Some of it was the challenge we've had around the cost of living has seen the federal government spend some more.
In the past, the government has had the benefit of tax windfalls to pay for its spending increases. Why does the government have to look elsewhere now?
Because those windfalls are temporary. They have been magnificent. People tend to forget the budget does get driven by two things, the decisions of the politicians, but also everything else, what's happening in the economy, most notably in the last couple of years. War has driven up the price of stuff we sell to the world, and so the taxman got a slice of that. Our population's gone up relatively fast with a burst of migration, more people to tax. And inflation is itself a tax. It changes the share of the pie going to the government. Now, those combination of effects on the government's own figures last year added $102 billion, more than was budgeted just a couple of years ago, into the pockets of the taxman. Now, that's a remarkable figure for 1 year alone. It would pay, for example, it did pay for 9 of the 20 biggest program expenditures of the federal government last year.
And so going forward, will the government be increasingly reliant on personal income tax?
And that's the risk. We've done, to some extent, what we've done before in Australia when we've had a burst of luck. True under Howard and Costello, we made permanent promises off the back of temporary luck. We've done it again this time. And that challenge is even bigger still because it looks as though there are a range of risks for the Australian budget going forward. Some of them are Trump-shaped. Basically, there are a bunch of important countries around the world now run by old men with big agendas and poor impulse control. And a more dangerous world is a more expensive world for Australia and our federal budget as well.
And so how do you see that impacting next week's budget?
Not enough, and that's the risk. Chances are that the budget will actually look slightly better. In recent weeks, we actually saw some things like iron ore prices look better, the Australian dollar a little lower against the US dollar. That combination helps the taxman, but it doesn't solve the ongoing problems. We have a bunch of taxes that are terrible. We have a bunch of spending that is stupid. Those barnacles have been building up for 2 decades now in Australia. Neither side of politics particularly challenging them. I mean, this so far looks like being a typical election campaign in Australia. If you look at the promises of both sides and look at the difference and then compare those dollars to what is budgeted in the next 4 years, the spending, the taxing over 4 years in Australia, that's 6 trillion Australian dollars. We're going to have yet another election campaign where both sides are arguing over less than 1% of the budget. We have big challenges. Neither side is addressing them.
Is delivering a pre-election budget harder than delivering a budget at any other time? And also, more to the point that you were just speaking about, the fact that a minority government is now a possibility, does that factor into the decisions that will be announced on the campaign trail? So a pre-election budget is always one that makes an economist sweat.
There's a chance of giveaways. There's a greater chance that those giveaways will be poor policy, will be popular rather than good policy. And that's maybe a particular risk with this pre-election budget, because although we've made great progress against inflation, you wouldn't say that battle has been completely won yet. And if the underlying equation of inflation is too much money chasing too little stuff, if governments or opposition, if they win, are throwing in too much money into the economy in the near term, that does make it harder for the Reserve Bank. So yes, the risk is the focus will be on the short term and winning of votes rather than the longer term and the challenges that Australia faces.
Chris, just one final question. The Treasurer has confirmed budget surpluses will end next week. How worried should Australians be that the budget will be in the red?
Look, not terribly worried. I am frustrated with the quality of decision making over the past 2 decades, both sides, that have left us with a bunch of barnacles on the budget. But we have had so much luck. You know, the rise of China and the rest of it has handed extra money to the taxman, much more than Treasury expected. That does mean that our deficits and hence our debts are looking much smaller here than in the likes, you know, for example, Japan, US, UK, many places in Europe would love to have the low level of debt that Australia has. Trouble is we've taken that luck to town. We've built up the size of government in the last couple of years. We haven't addressed some of these new challenges, perhaps including the dangers around the globe as some big picture things change. That combination says to me we do need to be worried over the longer term.
Chris Richardson, thank you for joining the program.
Thanks, Kirsten.